Hey friends, Chubby Meeple back with another game for you to check out. This is another quick to play, quick to learn, kind of chaotic game. Today we're talking about Psycho Killer. This is published by the fine folks at Escape Tabletop Games, distributed by Flat River Games. This is a game that will play 2 to 6 players and will play in 15 to 25 minutes. Let's jump to the table. I'll give you a quick overview of how to play Psycho Killer, what you can expect from the game, and then we'll jump back here and I'll tell you my thoughts. Psycho Killer is a game for 2 to 6 players that'll play in 15 to 25 minutes, maybe a half an hour. In Psycho Killer, players are going to be able to play cards out of their hand, as many or as few as they would like, and they will end their turn by drawing a card from the deck. When you finish your turn and you draw a card from the deck, if you happen to draw the dreaded Psycho Killer and you don't have the ability to double tap or slam the door in his face, all players at the table are attacked. You keep the Psycho Killer card. You then will throw down any and all weapon cards that are in your hands, as will all players at the table. These get added to your injury pile and become injury points. When the 5th Psycho Killer comes out of the deck and is played, and the rest of those weapon cards are taken out, the game ends and the player with the fewest number of injury points will be declared the winner. To set up a game of Psycho Killer, first remove all of the black cards from the deck. That is to say, the predicament cards and the Psycho Killers themselves. Shuffle that deck, deal each player 7 cards, then shuffle all the black cards back into the deck, set it in the middle of the table where all players can reach, leaving room for a discard pile, and you're ready to begin. On your turn, you play as many or as few cards from your hand as you would like, but at the end of your turn, you will have to draw a card from the deck, from the top of the deck, unless you've played a card to mitigate that. Some of the cards you might play during your turn are found footage. This lets you view the top 3 cards of the deck to see if you're at danger of drawing the Psycho Killer or one of the predicaments that can really hurt you. You can play orange cards, which are kind of jealous cards or cards that let you focus on yourself winning the game. These are essentially the cards you're going to play that will screw over your friends. Drop Your Keys, for example, allows me to pass 2 cards of my choice from my hand to another player. For example, I could use that to give them the dreaded chainsaw so that when an attack does happen, they get the 5 injury points and I don't. You could also play some of these green cards. These are cards that will allow you to end your turn in different ways. For example, this Booby Trap card lets me switch any card in my hand with the top card of the deck, and this fast forward symbol at the top of the card means that ends my turn as soon as I play one of those fast forward cards. So this is a way that I can mitigate my turn or end my turn without having to draw the top card of the deck. There are also cards in the deck that will do things like letting you take weapons cards out of your injury pile and return those to other players. This is taking them out of your injury pile and putting them in other players' hands. There is also the ability to take those cards and put them directly into another player's injury pile and giving those points to them. There's even the Reanimate card, which lets you get rid of a Psycho Killer that's already attacked you and put it back in the deck. So for example, on my turn, I may play this Drop Your Keys card to give 2 cards to another player and use that card to give them this chainsaw and this hatchet. That's going to pass 7 injury points to them that will go to their hand. And then if a Psycho Killer attack happens, then those cards would have to be played to the table by the other player and not by myself. To end my turn, I then draw the top card of the deck. In this case, I've drawn the Psycho Killer. When the Psycho Killer gets drawn, he gets played immediately unless I can slam the door, which lets me put that card back on top, whatever card I've drawn from the top of the deck. So this could be used in addition to the Psycho Killer, could be used with predicament cards, or really just any card that I drew off the top of the deck that I don't want. This lets me put that card back on top of the deck and draw the next card instead. I could also choose to play the double tap. The double tap is specifically if I've drawn a Psycho Killer, then it goes back anywhere in the deck. That would avoid me having to play it and avoid all the players getting attacked. I could also choose, since I just played Drop Your Keys and know I've passed 7 injury points to my opponent, I could also choose to just let this happen. All weapons cards in players' hands then get played to the table into their injury piles, scoring them injury points, which you do not want. And so maybe I have a tiny little meat cleaver in my hand that gives me an extra injury point. So this would be a total of 4 injury points for me. My opponent would have just thrown the 7 injury points on the table that I had passed them. And then any other players that have weapon cards in their hands would also be playing those down to the table. And one of the 5 Psycho Killers have now come out of the deck. We're that much closer to the end of the game. On a future turn, I could choose to play my Stitches card, which would let me move up to 3 points worth of weapon cards into another player's injury pile. So I could take this Meat Cleaver, pass it to an opponent, they would now get that point. And then, because I can continue to play cards until I choose to end my turn by drawing a card, or I play a card with a fast forward symbol on it, I could then play this Reanimate card that would let me return this Psycho Killer back to the top of the deck. And since it has a fast forward on it, my turn is over, meaning that the next player in line who needs to draw a card off the top of this deck is now set up to draw the Psycho Killer. And if I've set this up correctly, I'm not going to have any injury or any weapon cards in my hands that would get played to the table when that next player does draw the Psycho Killer. So there's a little bit of strategy that goes into this as well. An alternate way to set up and play Psycho Killer is to shuffle the entire deck, not removing any cards initially, splitting into 2 almost equal decks. They don't have to be exactly equal, you don't have to count anything out. And then players don't start with any cards in their hands, so it makes the start of the game already tension-filled because you could grab the Psycho Killer right out of the gate. In this version of Psycho Killer, when it's time to draw a card off of the deck, you pick which of the 2 decks you want to draw a card from, and draw from that deck. So there's some strategy there. Being able to return a Psycho Killer to another deck, drawing from the other deck, knowing that the Psycho Killer is on top of the first deck, it adds for some much more strategic play with the cards themselves. This also ramps up the danger right at the start because you don't have cards in your hand to be able to play in order to mitigate the top card of the deck or end your turn without drawing cards off the top of the deck. You're drawing those cards right away, so you could immediately start drawing weapons and predicaments you don't want to be in, and the Psycho Killer themselves. We've talked plenty about the Psycho Killer, drawing a top card off the deck, and it being the Psycho Killer. Every player gets attacked when that happens. There are other black cards in the deck that are called predicaments that you don't necessarily want to see either. For example, the Graveyard at Midnight card makes you draw the next 3 cards. And you have to draw those one at a time, could be a Psycho Killer, could result in multiple attacks. There is the Do You Want to Play a Game card. This lets you shuffle your hand with another player's hand, and then divide those cards evenly. So it could work in your favor, could hurt you. Step on a Twig. Each player gives you a card from their hand. So now you're gaining more cards, likely getting past weapon cards or cards that aren't terribly useful. Then you have the It's Behind You. The It's Behind You predicament forces you to pick up 5 points worth of weapon cards from other injury piles. Or yourself if you needed to. But essentially you're putting 5 points worth of weapons back into your hand, and if you're not able to get rid of those before the next Psycho Killer attack, those points are hitting the table in front of you in your own injury pile. And then we have the Car Troubles. Car Troubles lets you pick 1 card to keep in your hand, shuffle the rest into the deck, and then you draw 4 new cards. Again, one at a time, could trigger multiple Psycho Killer attacks, could trigger all kinds of injuries. Those are just a few of the cards that you'll see as you're playing Psycho Killer. Another alternate way to set up and play Psycho Killer is to shuffle the entire deck and divide it into 5 smaller decks. Again, don't have to be completely equal. You can just eyeball it, split them out evenly. But essentially, once the decks are split this way, you will then shuffle 1 Psycho Killer into each of the 5 decks. So you know every deck has a Psycho Killer in it, and through the course of the game, could end up having others get put in. But anyway, essentially what happens in this version is, again, you pick the deck you want to draw from when it's your turn to draw a card, but it ups the danger, because as soon as a Psycho Killer gets turned up from one of the decks, this entire deck now goes to the discard pile, and all of the cards that were in it, all the supplies, all the cards that let you pass cards to friends and screw over your friends, have now been discarded and are out of the game for the remainder of the game, and now you're down to 4, essentially what they call doors. And so you're going through and trying to protect yourself, trying to avoid the injury points, but knowing that each deck has 1 Psycho Killer in it, and eventually there's going to be a killer that's going to come out of one of these decks. And again, as those killers come out, things get more and more dangerous because more of your supplies are just being thrown away. This is a much more intense version of the game, plays a lot quicker as well. Have you played enough Zombie Killer base game and want to spice things up? Have I got good news? There are many expansions that can be played with Psycho Killer and just shuffled right into your base game. The first of these is Psycho Killer Z. This adds a lot of zombie fun to the game itself. You're going to be trying to avoid these killer infections, as well as what are called zombie weapons in the Swarm, the Scratch, and the Bite. These function differently than your regular weapon cards. The regular weapons we saw earlier with the chainsaw and the hatchet and all of those will still get played when a Psycho Killer attack happens. You'll still play any of those cards that you have in your hand. However, you do not play your zombie weapons during an attack. The only time you play zombie weapons, you'll hold these in your hand, unless you draw one of these infection cards. As long as you're holding an infection card in your hand, all zombie weapons have to be played to your injury pile immediately when you draw them. So it's much more dangerous in terms of that. So you're adding that tension of a zombie movie or a zombie survival instinct to you. You have some new cards that will help you kind of fight that off. You've got your supply run. This lets you take a random card from every player from each player's hand. Could be good for finding supplies. Could also be good for finding infections. The Shallow Grave lets you switch this card with the top card of the discard pile, so letting you refill your hand with something good that a previous player just played. And then you have, of course, the Cure. The Cure lets you shuffle all infection cards that are in play in players' hands back into the deck and getting rid of those infection cards. But watch out for Patient Zero. Patient Zero allows you to give one card to every player, but then you have to draw that same amount of cards from the deck. Another expansion you might add to Psycho Killer is the Bloody Mary expansion. The Bloody Mary expansion is going to turn your game of Psycho Killer into a drinking game. You're going to replace all 5 of the Psycho Killer cards with the Bloody Mary cards. They work exactly the same as the Psycho Killer, but they're used to reference some of the other cards in the deck. They're going to work the same, and you're also going to be providing drinks in there. So for example, your weapons in this game are your drinks. You have your beer, and your champagne, and your cocktails, and your shots, and your wine. And then we have the +5 keg. These are going to be played not in replacement of the other weapon cards. You'll play these in addition to the other weapon cards. Playing these weapons to the table means you have to drink various, could be alcoholic beverages, could be not if you'd like to play that way. You have books in here like the Book of the Brain Dead, where you have to finish your drink or pick up a card from the discard pile. Calling the Cops lets you request a specific card from a player's hand, but if they don't have it, you have to take a drink. The Hide Under the Bed card from the base game gets upgraded to Pass Out Under the Bed, where you're taking a drink in order to end your turn without drawing a card. Then you have a unique twist in this expansion where you have characters that you can play. A character card can be drawn. You don't start with these. But for example, the Bartender. Whenever a player needs a new drink, you have to get it for them. You have the Final Girl, where you don't have to drink while you have this card. And then there are cards that get rid of the character cards, unless you happen to have the Play Dead card, which prevents any character, including your own or one from another player, from being discarded out of the game. Again, you could play this true adult drinks, or you could play with coffee, tea, water, drink of your choice. The third expansion, not shown in this video, I'll put some images up so you can see it while I'm talking about it, is called the Gratuitous Violence expansion. And what this expansion adds mainly are ranged weapons, and the way ranged weapons work is you'll hold them in your hand just like a normal weapon, but when an attack happens, a Psycho Killer attack happens, if you have any ranged weapons in your hands, instead of those ranged weapons getting played into your injury pile, those ranged weapons get played into the injury piles of other players. So you get to throw those ranged weapons in other piles and give other players those points. And so it can add, again, just up the tension a little bit because you don't know who at the table has those ranged weapons. You may play a card or choose to trigger a Psycho Killer attack when you draw one thinking you're safe because you have no weapons in your hand, only to have 3 or 4 points thrown at you from other players. So just a bunch of different ways to up the ante, and there are a ton of different variable ways to play this game at the Psycho Killer website. There's variant rules in there, ways to speed things up, ways to, if you have the first edition of the game, ways to adapt to play the second edition rules, which I've talked a little bit about here. That is Psycho Killer. So that's Psycho Killer from Escape Tabletop Games. Very quick, very easy to learn, just absolute chaos. There's so much randomness going on at the table. I've played this at the base 2-player count. I've played it at the full 6. I think I've played it at 4. I don't remember. But I've played it with a bunch of different player counts, a bunch of different groups. This game is, at first glance, I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. It seemed like it was way too random. It seemed like it was, just this slapped-on theme of the psycho slasher genre. I love horror movies. I love especially the old slasher movies from the 80s and 90s. I'm glad to see that they're continuing to make those types of movies and revamping franchises like Scream, for example. Glad to see those things making a comeback. And so I was afraid this is going to just be a pasted-on theme, and in some ways it is, but That being said, there is a lot of the typical slasher movie trope that keeps it entertaining for me. I enjoy playing a card, drop your keys. So my friend dropped their keys. I have to give them 2 of my cards. Oh no, they're in further danger of being attacked by the psycho killer because now they may have more weapon cards in their hand. I like that aspect of it. I like the art. I think the artwork on the cards is very creative. I like kind of the silhouette of the psycho killers. You don't get any facial features or anything like that, which is great because that's your typical slasher. You don't. They look like they're usually wearing a mask. They're usually hiding out in the shadows somewhere. So it fits that theme as well. I like the fact that this is a very easy game to teach. There are a lot of variable rules in terms of how to set it up, different ways that you can play, different expansions, as we saw in the video, that you could throw in and kind of switch that play style up a little bit. You could even turn it into a drinking game if you really want to do that. So it's a super fun game. I like that it's fast to play. Even at the full 6 players, everyone's engaged on everyone's turn because you're trying to pay attention to what cards being drawn from the deck, what cards are being played. People are constantly passing cards your way, and you're getting cards passed to you. And so there's not a lot of downtime, even at 6 players, which is fantastic. And I just really like it. I like the fact that you can quickly shuffle up and do it again. The fact that it's a simple game means that I can sit at a bar or a coffee shop with friends and we can play this while we're having drinks and we're socializing, and we're not taking it that seriously. We're not staring down at the board trying to min-max points or anything like that. It's a very simple game. It's a great way to just play something while you're socializing. It definitely is take that. If you don't like take that games, you may not like this one. This one feels a little less take that-ish, if you will, just because of kind of the humor of it, and it plays so quickly that even if you lose one game, you can shuffle the cards back up and do it again. I love the variable rule setup of shuffling the entire deck, splitting it into 2 decks, and playing that way. That's my preferred way to play because, number one, the danger of drawing that psycho killer is there right at the beginning. You don't have any cards that you could use to play to mitigate that or avoid that. If that first card you draw is a psycho killer, sorry, everyone got attacked. The good news there is that you're just getting that 3 points from the psycho killer. You're generally not throwing a bunch of weapons down because you haven't had a chance to draw any yet. But I like playing it that way because it also adds a little bit of a layer of strategy in that I could choose to discard card. If I have the ability to put cards back in a deck, I could put the psycho killer in a deck. I could put circumstances or predicaments back in the deck. I could put weapons back in the deck and then make sure I'm drawing from the other deck so that my opponents are more likely to draw the cards that I just shuffled back in. So there is a little bit of extra strategy by having the deck split in 2. I definitely like that. The variant method of playing with 5 decks or 5 doors, if you will, I really enjoyed that because it gives you that sense of kind of you're running through this house and you're trying to find the way out and all these doors are being open and you're finding supplies and then, oh, look, there's the killer. We can't go that way. So then that whole door, that whole room, if you will, that deck gets discarded. All those supplies, any of those weapons that were in that room are all gone. And you don't know which ones are gone because they're just discarded. You're not going to go through the deck and see all of that. So it's a much quicker way to play. Every time I've played that way, the games have been done in about 10, 15 minutes. It's a much quicker way because the decks are much smaller when you play that way. I like the ability with the expansions to be able to shuffle it all together and play it all if I want. There are recommendations on Escape Tabletop Games website for if you just want to play with kind of the best of the best from each of the expansions. There's a section of their website that says play with these cards, and you can leave the rest out. I was worried that shuffling more cards into the deck would make the game run longer. But each of these expansions is about 15 cards. They're definitely less than 20 cards per expansion that are getting shuffled into the deck. So you're not really shuffling that much in there. I have seen some folks that have talked about that very problem. It's not really a problem, but where they felt like it did make the game a little bit longer. And their solution was just take the top 3/4 of the deck and shuffle the psycho killers into that deck. Again, if you're playing with the double deck solution or even the 5 deck solution, adding the expansions in doesn't really add that much playtime because you're going through the deck, especially a higher player count, you're going to go through that deck much quicker. So it definitely, if you like horror movies, if you like especially the slasher genre, if you like quick to play, quick to teach, quick to learn card games, you like take that and screwing your friends over, this might just be the game for you. Check it out from Escape Tabletop Board Games. That is Psycho Killer. And until next time, keep gaming, friends.